This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
We continue a health conversation with a turn to our kids in making good decisions about the use of cell phones. Dr. Catherine Athans has a doctorate degree in both clinical and health psychology. Dr. Athans is certified as a trauma therapist and has been a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 25 years. She's with us this morning to analyze some of the latest study results related to adolescence and smartphone use. Dr. Catherine Athans, good morning. It is so wonderful to have you join us once again, and Happy New Year to you.
And thank you, and Happy New Year to you and to all of your wonderful listeners. 2026 is an opening of light and opportunity for all of us.
Oh, and that's always so great to think about, is like, okay, this is an opening, it's a beginning, and let's think of a fresh start, a clean slate as we approach this new year. And this is the thing, our having this conversation this morning, being given this opportunity to talk about our kids and cell phone usage and all that entails. I thought this is so perfect because I'm so concerned about our youth and how they're impacted with social media and electronics and what it's doing to these poor young minds, these young brains, these young bodies. And so you have come to us today with some good research information that we can, I think, impart to parents.
Well, good. Yes, of course. You know, at the end, I think it was 89, UCLA had done extensive research on the cell phones and the radioactivity, the magnetic fields that they put out, and talked about how dangerous these are, even for adults. And I know that people were putting the cell phone to their ear for many, many years. And I know people who develop brain cancer from doing that. But what the research shows that kids' brains are developing, and developing brains do not need extra magnetic flow in them. It actually is stopping the development of the brain, and it interferes with that. But then moreover, what's more distressing is that it takes the place in the brain of empathy and compassion, and also it eats up the language center. As you have seen demonstrated, and I certainly have, young children who are on their phones do not have the ability to carry on a conversation, not have the ability to form a sentence. They're impatient. There's a lot of narcissism that goes on, and especially with social media. And we as parents have failed our children to not limit this, but to also not read about the research that has been done on these phones. And, you know, I'm in public, you're in public, and I'll see a parent hand their phone to their 2-year-old or their 3-year-old. And I say, please don't do that.
Yes.
They go, well, why not? I said, because first of all, your phone should be turned off and in some sort of bag in your purse, because it's emitting magnetism that interferes with your child's ability to think, and with the brain's ability to grow, and with your child's ability to speak. And we have now 2 generations of children. And I think at first parents were limiting the cellular usage of their kids. And then because of social media, well, I have to be on my phone. You know, if I'm not on my phone, if I'm not on TikTok or I'm not on Instagram, nobody's going to like me. Nobody's going to talk to me. I'm going to be the odd duck out. And parents are, unfortunately, not willing to take the stand that they need to take. I'm not saying all parents, okay? I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that more and more parents are being swayed by the child's saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. Don't take this away from me. You know, my life will be ruined.
Right.
And the life will be ruined with it because these kids are in the experimental group. Within another 10 years, we're going to have more data about the harm it's done to the kids. And parents, dear parents, please, whoever is listening to this, take your child's phone, turn it off, put it in a drawer when they're at home. If they're at home, get them a landline if they have to get on the phone. I've had parents bring in their children and they let their children sit all night in the dark with a phone, being on social media. The child doesn't sleep right. You get an extra bunch of this radiation, and then the child becomes listless, develops ADHD, may develop even paranoia because why are you taking this from me? This is my buddy. This is what I need to survive. And it's unfortunate because we have failed our children. Because what I see, and this is very horrible, I see parents wheeling their little babies around talking on the phone. How
I,
about talking to your kid?
yes. It begins that young with not paying attention to the child, either themselves being on the phone and paying more attention to whoever's on the other end of it, and not taking the opportunity to teach their child as they're walking along to point out whatever might be there. Maybe they're in a park. There are the flowers, there are the animals, there's statuary, or maybe they're just walking down the street pointing out things in a store window. That communication, they're not having it. There's no bonding happening then because there's that,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so then you have what we call insecure attachment disorders. And these are very serious because they last a lifetime and require deep psychological intervention. I have a young man now. He told me he has a attachment disorder where if he gets too close to anybody, he has to sabotage the relationship because he knows they're going to abandon him, like he was abandoned by his parents. So
Oh,
he sets his life up to be miserable and abandoned. And it's very sad.
yes. It feels catastrophic to establish this at such a young age. These are the formative years. Why do we have a child if we don't want to be helping them to learn and grow and become this wonderful person, but to
Well,
ignore them?
you've hit on the nail on the head because I had a client several years ago and she wanted to have a baby. I said, well, why don't you have a goldfish first and see if you can keep the goldfish alive more than a month? I have to have children. I have to. Well, this woman was extremely narcissistic, very self-involved. So she had two children. She continued therapy, and she would say to me, "Oh my God, I could never believe how much work it is to have children." And I said, these are human beings, the most complex animal on earth. What did you think was going to happen? So she had a hard time giving up her narcissism to nurture her children. And she tried at times to get her children to feed her narcissism,
Mm.
which caused them to have temper tantrums and various other behavioral issues. We straightened it out because, fortunate enough, she was willing to bring her kids to therapy too. So we had long therapy for the kids and for the mom. Now the kids are grown and the mom is grateful that she has these children. But what occurred on the way to them growing, they're still growing into adults. They've had miserable, depressive times. They've both been very suicidal. They've both been on some heavy duty psychotropic medication. And unfortunately, the human being requires attention. I mean, our dogs require attention. The goldfish requires attention. But a human being, you hit the nail on the head, requires their mom, dad, to look at them, to connect to them, to attach to them in a healthy manner, to let that child know that they are loved, that they're so important, that they're wonderful, that you just can't wait to see what they can learn and what they can do. And it requires parents to speak to their children, looking their children in the eye and talking to them. The other day, I had my Christmas shopping done and holiday shopping. So I went into Marshall's Home Goods just for fun. And I decided I was going to talk to all the little children there that I could. And I went up to this little boy. He looked so bored. I said, this is really boring, isn't it? And he looks at me. I said, I bet you're having a hard time sitting still. I said, it's really boring for me too. And he looks at me, he goes, yeah, yeah. I mean, we connected.
Yeah.
He was so shocked that I was willing to connect with him. And he was so happy. Another little girl didn't get her way and she wanted to go into a tantrum. And so I leaned over, I said to her, I said, it's miserable being a little person, isn't it? All these big people tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it. I said, isn't that maddening? And she looked at me like, huh? What? I said, yeah. I said, but you know what? Do what you can and you're growing. And as you grow, you're going to have more wisdom. You don't know what that is yet, but you're going to know what is good for you to do. And pretty soon, as you grow every year, you're going to get more freedom. And pretty soon, you'll be able to buy yourself your own Barbie. And she looked at me and she went, oh, huh, okay.
So, yes, they are just really wanting attention, not to have attention, but to connect. It's really that
Yes.
seeking connection and being able to, well, have a conversation, even though they don't know that's what they're having. But it's just that way of interacting and language and a device, certainly. These cell phones, and at a young age, we were saying how sometimes mothers place that cell phone in the stroller just to keep the child occupied. But I think they do it even in the car with older children. Here, just play with this rather than connecting and showing where they are and what they're doing. How do we get parents to really, put those kinds of parameters on the use of these devices?
Well, I think first of all, parents need to realize these are not play toys.
Mm,
This is a very intricate device that sheds a lot of electricity, a lot of electromagnetic fields, that it interferes with socialization. It interferes actually with people making true friends. It interferes with the child's experience of growing up and being a child. I know when I was a kid, we climbed trees, we ran, I fell and hurt my knee, we did somersaults, we're outside, we were moving, and those moving motions develop the brain. Climbing a tree actually sends the neural pathway across the middle of the brain, which is the corpus callosum, to the other side of the brain. And not allowing the children to do that actually doesn't allow the brain to develop. In a way, the brain gets smaller. And more recently, research has shown there are babies who are born and their brains are too small for what they should be. And part of it is the mother has laid the cell phone on her belly.
really?
Yes,
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
yes. We're talking about something that is a very complex instrument. I mean, how is it we can use that cell phone and you can call across the world? You can go to the other side of the world and it sounds just like the person is next door. How is that possible? Well, it's possible because there's a lot of electronic things going into the cloud, things bouncing around, which we don't know. And we've never had this kind of technology before, and we don't understand that our bodies are not made to absorb all of this kind of magnetic, electromagnetic energy, and that it affects our moods, it affects our ability to connect, it affects our ability to think. And we have to learn to think and think critically, and we're not doing that. All of the thinking is going to the phone, and it's thinking for our children. And so for parents, I'd say it's not easy being a parent, as I am a parent. However, it's less easy seeing your child have a brain injury in the hospital or having a divorce because they can't socialize or refusing to have children because they are too selfish.
Yes.
Our job as parents is to raise good people. It's not to be the friend of the child and not to be liked. Liking comes later. It's to really raise a good person with connection, interest. I know when I was growing up, we had the dining room table and everybody had to speak at the dining room table. My father was a big one for politics, so we had to cut out a current event. Even when I was 6, 7 years old, we had to do that. And we had to have an opinion about something. Then we had to say why we thought that. And so my father, especially, would look at us and talk to us about how we form our opinions. How is it we do that? And we need to know that. We don't just take something someone said because they're an important person and decide it's true. And now we do. Now we say, okay, some star says XYZ. So, oh, well, then that must be the way it is. And so we're not using our capacities and we're not using our brains and we're not using our God-given intelligence that's in our body. And these phones actually affect our body systems as well. Now, there's some research that's being done on that, but in order to get research done, it requires, I used to work at Stanford and SRI doing research, and it requires a very good person to write a research proposal. And then you send it off to the various appropriate agencies. And there's so much politics in who gets funded for what. Then you have to send a lobbyist over there and say, wait a moment, our research, you should fund our research because XYZ. And there may be another lobbyist that say, oh, don't fund that research, fund this. When I worked at SRI and I worked on a smoking research project, there were people from RJ Reynolds who came to us and said, if you slant your research to show that cigarettes are not harmful, we'll give you an extra $5 million for your research.
Ah,
Luckily, I had a boss who told him to get out, who
right.
had expletives. But a lot of people aren't that strong, you know, and
Yes.
they succumb to that. But anyway, so there is research being done, and then you have to go to the Office of Management and Budget, and then it sits there. So it's very difficult to get it done, but some is getting done in spite of everything. And thank God that this journal of pediatrics, because the pediatricians are seeing the results of this usage, and it's very disturbing when a human being is not able to speak in words. These kids are grunting, and I know because I hired a Gen Z person for a while, and all she could do was grunt, and she could not form a sentence. She could not think straight, and decided that I should pay her more money because she went to some school. I said, that's not the way it works here. and
Yes.
decided one day to come in her jammies. I said, that's not appropriate work attire. She goes, well, if I said, go home and change. No, I go home, I'm going to stay there. I said, good, stay there. So
Yeah.
many people in corporations now are trying to hire older people because they know they can hear and they can speak and interact. How are you going to take an interview for a job when you can't speak? How are you going to do anything? So
Right.
it's worse than that because it also affects the physical health of children. It affects the ability to concentrate. Thank God that many teachers are going back to having children write essays in class, and children have to learn cursive. They didn't want to teach cursive after a while.
Yes.
And I used to, when I had the kids, I always had a lesson in cursive as part of their therapy because it develops, there are more nerve endings from the brain to the fingertips than any other place in the body. And it develops those fine motor skills, but it also develops the ability to see and discern past the first layer of things, to look into a problem, to get to the root of it. And you cannot do that typing on a typewriter of any kind or speaking it into the machine. So teachers are now, because of the AI, having to have their kids write it out. And I suggest people use a pencil because the pencil has a little drag on the paper and it really reinforces language into the brain. And we need to reinforce that all the time because language is very complicated.
Hmm.
And to speak and to learn different words, for every word you learn, you grow a different neurotransmitter. And that's why people say, why do I have to learn all that vocabulary? Because your brain grows and your brain then can think on a finer level, can resolve problems on a deeper level. So we are taking that ability away from them. We're taking language away from them. We're taking patience and empathy and compassion away from them, and they expect instant gratification and have no ability to concentrate. Concentration used to be 30 seconds, then it was 20 seconds. Now it's 3 seconds, probably be no seconds pretty soon. And that is not a good thing to live a full life on earth and to communicate with others. So we've taught our children to be very self-absorbed, to be upset by things that are ridiculous. I remember walking my kids in the stroller and I did the very thing. I said, oh, look, there's an oak tree. What is an oak tree? Oh, it gives off acorns. There's a fir tree. What does it do? Look, can you tell the difference? And so you're interacting and you're teaching because our job as parent, we're the first teachers of the children, and we need to be teaching the children good skills for a lifetime of good life.
Yes. So we are the first teachers as the parents. And then thinking of teachers in the schools are now actually putting some guidelines around cell phones where they're telling them the students they need to leave them in their lockers or they are sealed away during the day until they're ready to leave, so that they're at the school, they know that these electronic devices are really impacting the kids and they shouldn't be in the classroom. So I think, if we haven't done that already as a parent to make that rule that it's not going to be with you all the time or any of the time until a certain age. In fact, what age would you think would be appropriate for a youth to have a cell phone?
What I did with my kids is when they drove the car, there was a cell phone in the car, and I made sure it was charged, and they could only use it in the car. I gave them each a landline, so if they wanted to speak on the phone, they got so much phone time after they did their homework. There were no cell phones in the house. And at dinner, everybody had to speak about something. It was required that you talk about your day or how you feel or what you saw in the newspaper or on TV or what you learned at school. And that's very good because we're not prompting the memories of these children either. And so many of these children don't remember what they did yesterday. And it's very not okay.
No.
And then you say, okay, I want you to remember the meanings of all these words. And then they become overwhelmed because they can't possibly do that. Because parents put the cell phone away. My kids only had it in the car, didn't have it till they were 19 or 20, which I would have preferred that they were a little older, but that happened. And they weren't allowed to be on social media. I didn't do that. I know that my kids back then, it was Facebook, and I limited their time on Facebook. They could have half an hour once they had their homework done, or they could have half an hour of television, whatever they wanted.
Yes.
So it wasn't just let them do whatever they want. They have free reign.
And that's it, the parental role.
Set the boundary, set the limits, set the consequence, set the reward. But also, I want to say something that is very out of date, but very important. I read a book to all of my kids from the time they were born. Even if they could not understand, I'd stick them in my lap and I would read a book, a children's book, maybe a fairy tale or different stories. And I read to my kids all the way until they were teenagers and didn't want mom anymore.
Yes.
My children all had good language skills. And it starts with the parent reading to them all the time. Because how do we learn language? We learn it through reading. And that's part of what gets thrown out when we put these devices in front of the children.
Right. And then there's such a great connection when you do that, sitting together, cuddling, or just somewhere in nearby, and that connection, the voice, and children begin to know what is their favorite and they ask for it over and over again. It's such a beautiful bonding time and really is going to be so great for their future growth. Well, sadly, our time is running out on us too quickly, Dr. Athans. And
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. We should mention your website so that people can get more information and find out about all of your books and all of the workshops that you have available. And that website is?
It's CatherineAthans.phd.com. And Catherine Athans is spelled Catherine with a C, Atherine, Athans, Athans, not E, but ANS, P as in Paul, H as in Harry, D as in dog.com. Please come to the website. I have meditations. I have lectures I've given. I have a full class schedule for 2026. And there's places to ask questions and to contact me if you want to. Thank you for having me on your show. And thank you for doing this service for parents because there's help everywhere.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that as well, Dr. Athans. It's been wonderful to connect with you once again and a great way to begin a new year off on a good start. Many thanks.
Many thanks to you, and God bless you, and God bless everybody, and Happy New Year.
Thank you for being here this morning to meet these special guests with their important stories and the opportunities they offer us to make our life better. Please check the station's website for the podcasts for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels. If you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. Take heart and do one good thing for yourself, one for someone else.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.